Welcome back to Seasons, a devotional series based on my book by the same name. And today we're going to talk about the Promised Land and the fact that when the children of Israel crossed into the Promised Land, they discovered it was occupied. As I've mentioned, I had the joy of working with newcomers to Canada, and I also had the privilege of working with refugees in a refugee camp itself. There was one woman in particular that I got to know in the refugee camp. We became pretty close friends because her English was quite good. I knew she was coming to Canada, so we had a lot of conversations about what she should expect when she came here. I soon discovered that an awful lot of her preconceived ideas about Canada were based on books and magazines in the camp library. And most of the magazines she read were fashion magazines and women's magazines that talked about movie stars and glitz and glamour. I tried to tell her that was not how life was in Canada, and I kept on trying to point her back to her faith because I knew she was going to need to rely on her faith when she arrived in a very strange land. 2 years after she left to come to Canada, I moved to the same city where she had moved to as well. I was quite surprised to learn that she was a single mom of a 2-year-old little boy. Unfortunately, the giants that I had gently tried to point out to her about the promised land she was about to enter did get to her. She eventually abandoned her faith completely. On the other side of the coin, quite a few years after I lived here in Edmonton and I no longer was involved with Youth with a Mission, I was introduced to a young woman in my church who happened to be a recent arrival to Canada from a refugee camp in Africa. She grew up in a very strong Christian home, and she had a very good job before war destroyed her country. In the first years of her life in Canada, discouragement, disappointment, and loneliness were her constant companions. She did not understand the Canadian church culture at all, and she was constantly having to guard her heart against judgmental attitudes about some of the ways we did things in Canada that would have been greatly frowned upon in her home nation. But she learned the hard truth that she had to have a grateful heart. And that grateful heart had to come from a deliberate daily choice if she was to prosper and if she were to have any sort of Christian fellowship. There were giants in the land for both of these young women, and they had a choice to make. Were they going to see those giants through the eyes of their God who had rescued them from a war-torn nation, or were they going to compromise to fit into their new land? Or on the flip side, were they going to judge everything that was going on in the new land to the point that they were not able to move because of longing for the spiritual superiority of their former land? If you find yourself in a strange land, so to speak, a land that you would have not chosen for yourself, you still have a choice. Perhaps you have some serious health issues in this land you're in right now. Perhaps you're struggling in an unhappy marriage, or perhaps your children have fallen into addictions. You have a decision to make. You can choose to serve the giants of your land. Bitterness, criticism, doubt, hopelessness, envy, ungratefulness, or you can choose to serve the Lord in the land where you have found yourself. Joshua 24 verse 15 says, "And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river, are the gods in whose land you dwell now. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord.